HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Novelist from Berlin by V.S. Alexander. Read by Deborah Balm. The roofs that you see are not built for you. The bread that you smell is not baked for you. And the language that you hear is not spoken for you. Irmgard Coin, After Midnight. Prologue. This is a story of survival, a story about never giving up despite what comes your way. Looking back upon my days, I'm ashamed of many. I was neither a saint nor as evil as the regimes I lived under. My deeds, even after the wall fractured Berlin, were matters of life and death. I did the best I could, as one had to do in order to live in fascist Germany and then in East Berlin. For many of my actions I must apologize, but not for all. I married a man named Rickard Länger. He was a husband and father, and became a National Socialist after we were wed. Our lives are part of a story others begged me to tell, but I wrote, years later, for myself, with no expectation of being published. People have told me that I can be as slippery as jelly on toast. By that, they mean I work myself out of bad situations with my skin relatively intact, but my emotions are often bruised. People don't always know the truth behind the story, and that's what I'm going to tell you. I became a celebrity in my own right when my books were published before the Nazis ruled Germany. Because of my novels, I've had more than enough danger in my lifetime. The world is a better place at the moment than during the 71 years I've lived, but history warns us we're often doomed to repeat our mistakes. I've lived through the Great Depression, Hitler, World War II, the Berlin airlift, and the Berlin Wall. Many mornings I wonder how I survived these catastrophic events. There's no easy answer to that question. Money flows like a river, sometimes full and flush, and other times dry and barren. Wealth was so much more important to me when I was young. Journalists want to tell my story. Women want me to come forward because some admire what I did. Editors want to reissue my novels, and they clamour for an autobiography. The attention and fame I sought when I was young has transformed into a desire for peace and security. Money is good, but I want to write for myself, only because I want to validate my own worth. Happiness is being able to live one's life as one chooses. I'm content in my little village away from Berlin, with my 2 dogs and 2 cats to keep me company. They provide companionship and bring warmth to my home. Read what I have to say. Pay attention to my words before the next Hitler arises, before the next World War blooms. All any of us want is to love, be loved, and to live our lives in peace. When I was young, I wrote about the new German woman. That woman is long dead, and a modern one has taken her place. If someone finds my story, I hope the men and women of today will understand what history has taught us. Editor's note. This fragment was found in December 1983 in a trunk in a deserted farmhouse west of Berlin, Germany, along with the manuscript that follows, both written at least 10 years before. Book 1. Chapter 1. Remembering the Weimar Republic, October 1929. The Nazis were scum. Der Abschaum, as my friends and I used to call them. Those outside the National Socialist political sphere knew that, but few stood up to them, and by 1929 Germany was in deep trouble, with much worse yet to come. The National Socialist movement didn't burst forth like a spring tulip. The Nazis took their time, bending the truth, propagating their lies, using their strong-arm tactics. The warnings were in front of us, but we didn't pay attention. Who, after all, was this power-hungry former criminel named Adolf Hitler? In the beginning, many laughed at him and dismissed his threats as the ravings of a madman. At 18 years of age, I was a new German woman. I stayed away from the Sturmabteilung, the SA brown shirts, as much as possible, because the concepts of freedom and liberty had deserted their boggled minds, even though they espoused such ideals in their fascist propaganda. The world was very 1984 in those days. A few years later, you couldn't walk down the street without passing a parade of them, haughty and smug in their invincibility. They were the living evidence that our freedoms and our lives would never be the same, and in many cases would be taken away. During the Weimar years, I smoked Manoli cigarettes and drank cherry brandy, especially when a good-looking man was buying at the Leopard Club. It was a grand establishment, close to the Alexanderplatz, housed in the first floor and basement of a large stone apartment building. God knows what the tenants thought of the ruckus below them until all hours of the morning, but my fellow club devotees and I didn't care. We were having a good time, living, loving, and most of all, surviving. Sometimes a piece of Schweinfleisch appeared on a white china plate in front of me as I chatted up a man at the bar, or vice versa. The plate would turn blue, red, green, or yellow in the club's lights, depending on the mood of the delicious bartender, Rudy. He was a man who liked tight pants and even tighter shirts, who had the kind of muscled body that drove women mad, visible but not excessive. He spent many hours in the gymnasium. Rudy, with his wavy black hair, sparkling eyes, and smoky voice, flattered me, but that was the way he operated. I thought he was sexy. We never acted upon our tenuous mutual attraction, except for a few arresting kisses in a corner booth of the basement cabaret. I found out later that he had a thing not only for girls, but boys as well. Gender didn't matter to Rudy, as long as the sex was good. My girlfriend, Lottie, often accompanied me in the evening, after she escaped her office job as a typist. She was lucky to have it, always aware that work like hers, although common, had little turnover and much competition. A million other girls were always there to take your place if you stepped out of line or asked for too much time off, or worst of all, demanded a raise. Typing interested me only when I was writing. I decided that I had no use for menial labour. I wanted to be a star, like the glamorous women whose photos graced movie magazines. I knew that before I even thought about writing. My mother, despite her Lutheran background, read the publications that I would peruse in secret after she went to bed. There was a deeply buried side to my mother that longed to break free from the drudgery of everyday life. Many women in Berlin had the same fantasy that was unfulfilled in the Weimar years. One late night at the club, after many brandies, Lottie dubbed me Niki. "It has to have 1K, even if it looks Russian," she said. "It's frightfully exotic and suits someone with a face like yours." I had no idea what she was talking about, but I took it as a compliment. I lit a Manoli cigarette. "Who's that man over there?" she asked, tilting her head to the left. "He keeps looking this way." I was charmed that Lottie had created a new name for me, rather than use the dull one I'd grown up with, Marie Rittenhaus. So I'd barely noticed the slick-looking man at the end of the bar, who smiled at us and then slipped away. He wore an expensive black suit and shiny leather shoes and carried a pack of gold-filtered cigarettes. Rudy picked up the man's glass from the bar. "What was he drinking?" I asked as Rudy drifted over. He leaned toward me and popped open a button on his shirt, exposing a swath of dark chest hair. "You like him? I'll introduce you." Lottie sighed. "Why is it always you? I spot them, and you get them." "Courvoisier," Rudy said, answering my question. "Oh, nice. He's handsome and seems cultured. Not the usual type who hangs out here. What's his name?" Enough of the insults. Rickard Länger." Rudy wiped the onyx bar with a damp cloth. "He's a leading movie producer in Berlin." Länger," Lottie said, wriggling her nose. "I wonder if the name holds true." "From what I've heard," Rudy said with a touch of boredom, and went on about his bartending. Movies! The great Niki," Lottie gushed. "That'll be your screen name, or the sexy Niki." "The silly Niki. I said, looking at my watch. I have to go. Coming or staying? The gentleman left. Nothing for me here, Lottie said. 2 girls on our own. I have an audition tomorrow, I said, referring to a small part in a cabaret show that I'd found listed in a newspaper. We grabbed our coats, intent on braving a brisk mid-October night. I whistled for Rudy, and he came bounding over. You're leaving, c'est dommage. The next time Rickard Länger settles in for the evening, call my building. I'd like to meet him, in a professional capacity. Is he married? I don't think so. I'll give you a call, Niki. Word of my new name had travelled fast. I gave him a respectful kiss on his lips, not as slow as he liked them, but sufficient enough. Lottie and I walked through the square and then toward my apartment near the Berliner Dome. It was almost midnight, but Königstrasse was packed with people out for a late-night stroll. The air was filled with mist, the droplets catching on our coats and covering our faces like sweat on a humid summer day. The night-light shimmered on the wet street. Our breaths rolled out in steamy puffs in front of our faces. The cool air felt good on my skin after the stale atmosphere of the Leopard Club. As we walked, Lottie talked about her miserable existence as a typist and encouraged me to pursue my creative careers. What if this audition doesn't work out? I asked. It's only a small part and doesn't pay much. My stage experience is in school plays, not exactly the kind of work that directors are looking for. This profession got into my head from looking at my mother's movie magazines. I'm running out of money. The temporary typing jobs seem to be drying up. Soon I'll find myself living with her again. No woman my age wants to live with her mother. Then do something else. Write a book. You've told me 100 times you'd like to write a novel, how the pictures go through your head. I wish I could write a book, or star in a movie. It's hard to earn money these days. A woman has to rely on her wits as well. Or whatever she can, Lottie added. We arrived at my apartment. With no space to entertain, I rarely asked anyone to come inside my 2-room flat. For the privilege of living here, I paid 8 marks a week, furnished. Lottie had been inside many times, but she was one of the few. If I was with a gentleman, I went to his place to make sure he wasn't married. I didn't have sex with married men, even those who, as a ruse, took off the ring. Some girls would sleep with a married man for a coat or jewellery, but I couldn't. It was a rule I wouldn't break. Perhaps the Lutheran upbringing that my mother had jammed into my head had warped me, despite her minor obsession with glamour. After all, photo playgirls weren't necessarily harlots. I hadn't been to church since I left home. My refusal to go to bed with a man claimed by matrimony was rooted in the horrible knowledge that I'd betrayed his wife, a living, breathing woman who had feelings like mine. I didn't want that done to me. I kissed Lottie on the cheek and walked up the stairs, passing the communal telephone that served the building. I hoped that Rudy would give me a call about Rickard. When the phone rang, it never went unanswered. 2 or 3 tenants on the lower floors fought over it. I opened the door, and a scene appeared from a novel I'd been thinking about, The Last Man. I was the heroine. Buttery light filtered through a window that looked into the courtyard below. A single linden stood there, its branches flexing grey fingers toward the sky. She always looked forward to fall, when the tree would shed its leaves, brown and gold upon the ground, for that meant the low winter sun, nested in the southern sky, would strike her room a few hours a day. In the summer, she felt wrapped in a green cocoon, soothing her when the rain struck the leaves in silver bursts, but ultimately leaving her depressed, claustrophobic, and anxious in the humidity and the photosynthetic world that surrounded her. Nothing could hide her shame. He was coming for a visit, and he'd see the bed she'd tried to make as comfortable as possible, the old feather pillows, the green goose down comforter folded neatly at the bottom of the mattress, the sheets a bit yellow with age. He would notice the old hot plate she'd polished to a metallic glint, the vertical mirror, its gilt frame cracked to white in several places, its bluish tint circling the glass. She kept the small bathroom as clean as possible with an ocean of bleach and soaps. All of this preparation would signal that she had little money and nothing much to offer except her body. How long would her attractiveness last? How much could she get from him without falling in love before he tossed her away? There it was, in my mind, how I and many other women survived the world we were born into. I closed the door, threw my coat on the comforter, and shut the window I'd left open. My eyes fluttered as I crawled into bed, and I wondered how long it would be before I got a message from Rudy about Rickard Länger. I didn't get the part, but a call came about 8 p.m. a week later from the smoky-voiced bartender. "He's here for another hour. Maybe longer if you can convince him to stay." I grabbed my coat, rushed out the door, and even sprang for a taxi, which was a luxury, considering my financial state. I'd worked a few typing jobs, but was stretched thin. When I arrived at the Leopard Club, the doorman who knew me ushered me in. The chill bite from the wind disappeared as I stepped into the stuffy hallway. Once again, smoke and mirrors filled my senses. A warm blue light spread over the bar and across the tables. It was like stepping into a shimmering pool of water in summer. The cigarette smoke softened the light even more, rendering it fuzzy and semi-transparent. The voice of a female singer in the cabaret below flowed up the stairs. Rickard sat to the right of the bar, tucked into one of the small booths that lined the wall, apart from the dining tables. He was a vision in blue and black, the colour settling in muted veils on his dark suit, the straight line of a shadow cutting across his face. The usual denizens of the club sat nearby, girls who dressed like boys, boys who dressed like girls, a few stiff businessmen waiting for the liquor to loosen them up, a sour-faced war veteran from 1918 who looked out of place among the younger crowd, as if he had wandered in from the street. I waved to Rudy, who pointed in the direction of Rickard's booth. He needn't have, for the man had already spotted me and risen from his seat like a gentleman. My nerves tightened, and I smoothed my coat in an effort to calm myself. What had stoked my anxiety? I wasn't sure. I'd been with a few men, nothing serious, most of them allowing me to live on and off with them for a month or so until one of us grew tired of the other, providing a few laughs and, most important, some good food and wine. Perhaps my skin tingled because I found this man filled with possibilities, unlike most of the others. He was handsome enough to make my heart flutter. However, I didn't know if he was married. Even Lottie was unclear on that account. Rickard took my hand and guided me into the booth opposite him. His fingers were somewhat cold despite the heat in the room. I assumed his luminous eyes were blue, but it was hard to tell in the light of the same colour. His hair was parted on the left and slicked back in a current style that swept past the crown of his head. The black suit may have been the same as the one he wore when I first saw him, but the shirt was different. It was black as well, the only spot of colour being the muted burst of a diamond stick-pin through his tie. I judged he was in his early to mid-30s. The age difference wasn't a problem for me. I liked a man who was settled. A large bottle of cognac and 2 glasses sat on the table, his half full. He poured me a drink and leaned back in the booth, studying my face and figure as I took off my coat. "I'm happy you could come," he said in High German, and after a pause, "Niki." I was so unused to the formality and the nickname that I stuttered a greeting in return. "Sorry, I'm used to dealing with business partners," he said, slipping into a less formal mode of speech. I sipped the cognac, and it slid down my throat in a smooth, pleasant way. I put the glass down and looked at the crowd filling the tables. "Herr Länger, it's a pleasure to meet you. I assume Rudy told you the nickname my girlfriend gave me." "Yes, I like it. I was interested in meeting you." He tore open the foil pack of the gold-filtered cigarettes and struck its corner against his fist. A smoke popped out and he lit it. "Call me Rickard. We might do business together." He offered me one. I declined. They weren't my brand. "Are you married?" I asked. His brows lifted for a moment and then settled as he smiled. "You don't waste time. A debatable personality trait." The raucous laughs from a table of drunken businessmen diverted his attention. "I like to know what I'm getting into, no matter the proposition," I said, when he returned his gaze to me. "For the moment, business," he said, answering my question. "I like your look. Rudy may have told you that I produce movies." I nodded. "I'm making one now, about vampires." I laughed. "Hasn't that been done? Nosferatu?" He inhaled luxuriously and let the smoke drift out of his nose. "That kind of filmmaking is dead. Angles and shortened perspectives are out. Realism is what I strive for. Murnau's film doesn't go far enough. So many stories have been based on Stoker's Dracula, but I want to tell the tale of his brides, his many loves. It's a speaking role, only a few lines. You look the part." Should I be flattered or insulted? I took another drink. "Definitely a compliment. Turn your head to the side." I did. Yes, a splendid profile. A true beauty. I wondered if this was his way of making an advance. I'd looked in the mirror on my way out the door and hadn't been fond of the view. My hair was too long for the current fashion. I had purple blotches under my eyes from worries about money. I thought my nose was too big, my bust too small. "You overestimate, I'm sure." "No, when I see it, I know it." He leaned forward, studying me in the blue light. "You have a classic profile. Don't cut your hair, because the style at the turn of the last century was longer. We have wigs to add to the length. And whatever you do, don't erase that birthmark on your left cheek. It adds to your personality and beauty." I thought of it as an unsightly spot, and many times I'd considered having it removed, but decided the cost wasn't worth it. "You're tall for a woman." He stubbed out his cigarette in the glass ashtray. "But you're not gangly. You exude a certain style and grace. We start shooting the wife scenes tomorrow morning. Can you be there?" "How much does it pay?" "How much is your rent?" $8 a week. I'll give you 10 a week as long as you're shooting, but don't tell the other girls." I extended my hand like the businesswoman I'd become. "Agreed." "Your call is at 8. Don't be late or I'll have to get another girl." He reached into his suit pocket. "Here's my card, in case you need to get in touch." "I'll be there." He rose from the booth, cupped my head in his hands and turned it gently to each side. "Wonderful." He tilted his head toward the cognac. "Keep the bottle." After Rickard left, Rudy floated over to my booth, pretending he wasn't interested in what had transpired. He wore a pair of tight slacks that turned the heads of every sex when he walked through a room. Tonight, he'd topped off his outfit with a white shirt and vest that turned blue or grey, depending on where he stood in the light. "Would you like something to eat?" he asked, eyeing the 2/3 full bottle of cognac. "Sauerbraten? Cheese?" "No, not really. I have a call tomorrow morning." I looked up and smiled at his pleasing face. "I knew it," he said, smiling back. "I'm thrilled. Lottie will be too." "I'm playing one of Dracula's wives." "A vampire? Perfect casting." "Oh, be still. Care to join me in a toast?" Rudy was about to reply when a commotion broke out near the club door. Everyone looked toward the entrance. Rickard, breath pulsing from his lungs, rushed through the maze of tables and slumped into the booth. He pulled Rudy toward him. "The thug slugged me in the stomach and your doorman took a punch to the eye. I don't think the bastards will come inside." "Walter's been hurt?" Rudy asked. "He's okay. He yelled for the police. They're out there now." Rudy strode toward the door. I leaned across the table, trying to get a better picture of what Rickard had been through. His hair was ruffled, and it appeared that one of his lapels had been torn. His eyes were wide, his lips pressed firmly together. I slid next to him and poured a drink. He drained it in one gulp. "What happened?" "They know who I am." The glass slipped a bit in his hand. "I'm important to them because I have money. They think I have much more than I do." His mouth turned down derisively. "They want payments for protection, for me and the studio, and they'll stop at nothing to get them. For years I've been able to avoid them like the annoying insects they are, but now they're following me. They jumped me just as I was about to get into a taxi. I found it hard to believe what Rickard was saying, but the proof was in front of my eyes. The SA had been around for years. I'd heard a few stories about what they'd done, sometimes roughing up a person, calling them names, but I'd never witnessed anything like this. It was hard to tell sometimes whether the tale you heard was true or an exaggeration. Germany was changing, and I, like many people, had ignored what was happening because it hadn't affected me. "Are you all right? Do you need to see a doctor?" "I'm fine." I fought back, surprised myself, but I do need another drink. The cognac was down to about half now. Rudy, his face as immobile as a Greek statue, returned to the booth. "Walter has a small cut under his eye, but he's fine otherwise. Now, I've got to warn the owner to be on the lookout for the brown shirts. Brown shits is more like it." "Give Volker my best," Rickard said. Rudy stormed off to find the man. "Well, I'll make my exit again," Rickard said. "Certainly they're gone now." "We'll take a taxi together," I said, gathering up my coat and the cognac. If nothing else, I could use the bottle as a weapon to stave off another attack. We reached the door, having walked past the inquisitive eyes that gazed at us from the tables, and stepped outside. The weather had turned colder, and I braced myself against the wind while looking for the SA. None were to be seen. Walter, sporting a bandage under his left eye, asked Rickard if he was injured. My new employer once again declared his good health and tipped the doorman 10 marks for joining in the fracas. We got into the car, and I gave the driver my address. "You live near the Dome," Rickard said. "Yes, in a very small 2-room apartment with little space for company." "That's too bad," Rickard said. A few minutes later, the taxi stopped at my street. "Tomorrow, be prepared to suck blood," Rickard said as a joke. The driver shot us a disgusted look in the rear-view mirror. Rickard held onto my arm as I tried to exit. He pulled me close and kissed me on the cheek. My face flushed as I said goodnight. The cab sputtered away. As I walked up the stairs to my apartment, I looked over my shoulder, the first time I'd ever done so. I couldn't shake the feeling that the SA might come rushing after me. I quickly put the key into the lock and hurried into my room. Chapter 2. I arrived at the studio about 7:30 after a quick breakfast and a smoke. I had no idea what to do with my hair or makeup before I left the apartment, so I left them alone. The studio was about a half-hour away, but the crush of workers on the trolley threw me behind schedule. I was jostled about like a juggler's pin. When I stepped onto the lot, I brushed my hair and pinched my cheeks for a little colour. Passport Pictures sat in a field by the airport. Several major roads ran nearby, and a railroad spur snaked onto the back of the property. The rusty tracks, harbouring a healthy growth of weeds between them, looked as if they hadn't been used for years. Behind the arched entrance, trees bedecked with yellow and brown leaves formed a semicircle around a low brick building. That structure was joined on each side by 2 massive vertical rectangles of steel and stone that rose like cathedrals from the ground. Those, I assumed, because of their blacked-out windows, were the studios. A guard met me at the entrance and asked my business. I told him I was here to see Herr Länger about my role in a vampire picture. He instantly knew what I was talking about and directed me to Studio 1, which was to the left of the low building. Because the clock was ticking, I hurried to the location, impressed, excited, and somewhat overwhelmed by the size of the business in front of me. I hadn't had time to call Lottie to tell her about the role, but I was certain she would share my enthusiasm and anxiety. My mind raced as I reached a small entrance next to a larger opening covered by a hangar door. I pictured my face on the cover of movie magazines, stylish, made up to look much older than I really was, outfitted in a dress dripping in silver spangles that accented my cleavage and the white softness of my skin. As I pulled on the handle, I also considered that it had been more than a year since I'd done any work on stage, and that in a school play. The image of me as a star
Sample complete. Ready to continue?